Great. So Ben, do you want to just give us a quick introduction to yourself and your background and what Second Voice Pro do, and then we'll dive into the questions. Founders, as always, we'll have plenty of time at the end for a Q&A, and you can also raise your hand and we can ask you questions throughout as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me. First of all, can everyone hear me all right? Just a thumbs up, just to make sure sounds cool. Brilliant. So my name is Ben Bennett, and never really thanked my parents for that one, but I am a B2B salesperson, and I've been in B2B sales for north of 23 years now. So I started out my career selling media advertising. I've done everything from door knocking through to high volume call centers, outbound call centers, and worked my way through the B2B world, through advertising, through the conference space, unsurprisingly into tech, which is where it's at, and have decided to go out on my own about 6 or 7 years ago as a trainer and consultant. And in doing that, had a very wonderful time, got to travel the world, got to meet a lot of people, share a lot of knowledge, pick up more knowledge than I was sharing, which was fantastic. And Second Voice is as a training, as I said, training consultancy organization. And about 9-10 months ago, my co-founder Sarah, who's in the room with us, we decided to launch a new iteration of the business, which, as well as doing strategic go-to-market planning and consultancy and training, realized that actually there was a lot of founders out there that, although knew what they could do, didn't necessarily have the time or want to do it. And so we evolved Second Voice to be an embedded SDR function. So what we do is we do the outbound motions for our clients, and if people are looking to hire and create their own sales development teams, we actually hire the people into our organization on your behalf, house them in our office, manage them, and do all of the top level, top of funnel, go-to-market qualification aspects for our clients, with a view that then should those individuals have great success, you can eventually hire them off us to become full cycle sales reps, to have and to hold in your own organization. And we're trying to focus on working with individuals that are from non-standard backgrounds. So those that might typically get overlooked in a recruitment process, we look for ambition and potential attributes that will make an individual successful in sales. And we ultimately, above everything else, we have a hell of a lot of fun doing it. And the idea really is to make sure that we're arming everybody with the information that they need, the support that they need, get results for the clients, and help people build successful careers. So I am pretty much a one-trick pony. It is B2B sales. I do love it. So if there's anything that I can't answer today, I may know people that will have a better answer for you than I do, and I'll be sure to make those recommendations. But appreciate all your time today and look forward to having a chat.
Awesome. And I know we had this conversation before, Ben, but the founders here are all, the focus of the program really is to get them to build on the metrics that are important to them so they can fundraise. And so for a lot of those people, that is winning over new customers. And so I think the founder-led sales journey is what a lot of people are going through. And with the cohort, we've got B2B and B2C, but obviously B2B sales is a huge, big thing to get into in terms of winning over enterprise level corporates or large businesses, how you build those relationships cold, what they're looking for in terms of metrics and success. And so there'll be a bunch of founders from across all different industries that are tackling exactly this right now. So let's get into it. I guess from a founder's perspective, if you are looking at going in cold to an organization, what's the best approach to do that? I'll keep it really high level for now, and then we can dive into detail. What would you say?
Sure. So, I mean, first of all, you want to find out specifically who it is you're going after. So given the fact that you've done work around TAM, SAM, SOM, I'm making the assumption that you've worked through ideal customer profiles and the needs of individuals. And I think it all comes down to going where your potential customers are. So in the B2B space, there's an increasing fear of the phone and verbal communication, and lots around email and LinkedIn outreach. And so what we try to encourage when doing B2B is having a good mix of going out to trade shows and events and meeting people and actually putting in the hard yards. But actually, if you're going to do something from your desk, you can scale and you can create outbound motions across email, LinkedIn, and phone that encompass elements of automation, but engage with each other. And what I mean by that is don't send a whole bunch of emails in a row and then repeat it and do the same thing again on LinkedIn and then harass people on the telephone. What we want to be doing is using those different channels to say, I don't know, leave a voicemail for someone. I'm about to send you an email titled X and signpost it. Or you connect with someone on LinkedIn and say, I sent you an email yesterday, just putting a face to the name. When you're doing more human behaviors using multi-channel approaches, it usually demonstrates that you're trying to approach that individual just one-to-one, and you're not just doing this, let's go and spam an email list and just hope that we get a good percentage reply. So B2B specifically, I would look at going around events, be it online or in real life, email, LinkedIn, and phone integrating with each other. When you're looking at that B2C angle, again, how do you build community? How are you looking at where there are audiences that are captive already, understanding what those advertising channels are, and what I call building your own stage, which is, instead of going to somebody else's events, run your own events, get people signing up to your content, collect those mailing lists, find ways to capture that data that's going to enable you to build them into an effective sequence of communication, which will usually be through advertising or email or events similar to this.
Do you have any tips on identifying who the right person is in the organization to sell to? So if you're going, I guess, through LinkedIn as an example, are you looking for a procurement team or the FD or someone else? Because everyone says you need like internal ambassadors within the organization that you're selling into to kind of help you sell to the organization. So what would your approach be for that?
So we would encourage you to define 3 types of individual in a company. They are the economic buyers, they are the internal champions, and they are the end users. Now, it's important to note that one person might be all 3 of those in a company, but if they are going to be different roles, spend time mapping that out. Now, mapping that out is, putting in the effort to have those conversations and validate. I'll give you a prime example of this for our own business. I've been doing this for a long time, and we had our hypotheses around who the buyers would be and who the engaging audiences would be, who the users would be. And actually, as we went to market and were setting up these conversations and validating our ideas, we quickly realized that we'd gone slightly off center of where we needed to be, and we were focusing on a persona that actually wasn't correct. So you need to make those hypotheses and those assumptions about who it is that's buying, who it is that's using, who it is that will be your internal champion. Go outbound, email those people, connect with them on LinkedIn and ask the questions. And usually if you're doing a research exercise, they'll tell you themselves what they're facing, what they want to see, who you need to be speaking to. And in doing research to establish this, you will also build your pipeline as well. So you're going in there under a bit of cloak and dagger of research, but as you're doing your research, people will actually get curious and understand what it is that you're trying to achieve in terms of outcomes. And you should, in theory, be building out some pipeline during this research phase as well.
Yeah, I'm just going to take a question from the chat right now because it's relevant to what you just said. Should there be a different communication or approach to how you speak to a user versus a buyer versus a champion?
Yeah, 100%. So it's a really good question. And I think what we would always encourage you to do is focus your messaging and your value proposition and your reason for contacting someone based on that individual's needs. So for example, a CFO that might be involved in the buying process but would never see the platform or the service is going to be less interested in what it looks like and how many people you can get signed up to and what your customer success looks like, and will be more interested in return on investment, billing sequences, pricing. So compared to somebody who's using it day to day, where it will be saving them hours of time, you should be focusing on their individual's needs and how they want to receive information and what impact it has on their world. So what we do here is we will build lists of specific personas. So say we're working for company A and we are selling to CFOs, but we're selling to CFOs who have just moved into their job, either through promotion or taken a new position. And messaging will be around, congratulations on the new gig. We're trying to solve problem X. Do you want to hear more about it? Can we send you more information? So it's specific to a trigger and that persona. So the short version of that is get lists together of certain types of people and focus your messaging on that type of individual based on their role or the situation that they're currently in.
Yeah, I guess that's the whole what's in it for them thing, and just sell it as a benefit to them.
Absolutely.
Is there any best practice on like how long the email or LinkedIn message or whatever it might be is, and where the call to action is? Because I know like we get a bunch of cold outreach with Hotbed, and some of them are just so long, like I just can't bother to read it. So there must be some ideal length that someone is actually psychologically prepared to actually absorb.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you that are researching this already, you may have come across a tool called Lavender, and Lavender is an AI assisted tool that helps you structure emails based on, you know, the type of language you're using, how short the sentences are. Something that, again, we test. So, you know, if you've got an ability to send a bunch of messages, see what works and what don't. So you've got we're using a new framework at the moment, which is called the short and ugly. And the short and ugly essentially is it's less than 50 words. It hasn't really got a breakdown of sentences, but when you look at it on your phone, it's literally, you know, I'm reading all the words. I have to read all the words before my brain categorizes it as spam. So that's what we want to do first. We need to get past 8 seconds of mental spam filtering. And we want to make sure that we get the message across. So typically it's a, hey name, noticed you are doing X, or in position Y, or have seen blah. We've helped company A, B, and C achieve X outcome. Do you want me to send more details over? It's literally, it's short, it's ugly. It isn't about this nicely dressed up formal email. And I think, you know, we're so ingrained about, dear Sir, Madam, hi John, comma, next space. Actually, let's just put the text there, because what we're getting past is I'm reading it on my phone, most likely, and I'm going to categorize whether it's useful for me or not. And you just got to get in there quick. So, Purdy, you mentioned there are call to actions as well. So copy length, I'd keep it 50 to 60 words, really, really short. None of it is about you or what you do. All of it is about them and the outcomes you help achieve. And a call to action should never be asking for time. Can I have 15 minutes to tell you about? Can I have half an hour to walk you through a demo? I mean, ultimately, they're not going to be interested in sparing their time for something they've just heard about. What we're doing and what we're seeing working right now is asking permission to share more information. So this does two things. You typically get an engagement. Actually, yes, please send it to me. That's what we're fighting for here. We're fighting for an engagement. We're not fighting for a sale. We're not fighting for a meeting. We're fighting for an engagement. So if they reply and say, yes, can you please send me this thing? You know, send a video, send a PDF, send a case study, whatever it is that you're sending. You've got them then engaged in conversation. And once you've sent the asset or the information, make sure you're arranging time to follow up. So I've sent you this video now, which explains a little bit more about X. Can we speak now on Tuesday or Wednesday to get your thoughts on it? Because your job is to keep them in dialogue. And then once they've requested that, go add them on LinkedIn, send a blank message. Don't send a connection message. You get more people connect with you if you do not add an introductory message on a LinkedIn connection. And then when they connect, you can then say, just putting a face to the name, following up, hope you found the information useful. And then you're using email and LinkedIn together to try and keep them engaged. So just to clarify, 50 to 60 words, The call to action should not reference time or ask for time. And what we're seeing is asking permission to send more information so that they can peruse at their leisure, will usually pique interest and engagement.
Yeah, this might be a tough question, but like, when do you know when to give up, I guess? Like, is it, if they still haven't responded and you sent 6 emails, they're never going to respond? Is there any like numbers around that?
I'll tell you a story about when I started as a sales exec, and my sales director said to me, "If someone hasn't told you to F off, you're not trying hard enough." Now, I don't know how well that sits in today's day and age, but I think persistence and consistency is key. And it takes between 8 to 12 touch points multi-channel. So try the phone, try the email, try LinkedIn, up to 12, 14 times before you're likely to get a conversation. And this, we're talking general statistics. Some campaigns and outreach plans, you can get in touch with someone in 3 touches, but persistence is key. And the thing that I find it really difficult is to break the behavior of courtesy. I don't want to intrude on your time, and sorry if I'm pushing at this door too hard, but quite frankly, you're not selling here, you're trying to help them. So if a paramedic was trying to get through my front door and I was critically ill behind the door and I didn't answer the door, I would hope the paramedic tried to keep coming through the door. And that's kind of how I want you to think of this, is like, we're trying to help somebody solve a problem, and therefore it's my duty to continue to try and get in front of them and have the conversation so that they can see we are here to help. So we usually build out a sequence or a cadence it ranges from 1 month long campaigns that will be multi-channel, have longer periods between the touch points, or we run them really short, high intensity, just to see which works. And what I mean by that is I'm sending an email and a LinkedIn every single day for a week. Or over a month, I'm sending 7 emails, 5 messages on LinkedIn, and 15 phone call attempts. So whatever that needs to look like, there is no right or wrong way to do it. And there's lots of information out there that says what you should or shouldn't do. Ignore most of it, because it's going to be down to you to find out what works. So get a version 1. Where did you convert? What worked? What didn't? How many people went all the way through the sequence without unsubscribing or replying? And then try and work out where the gaps are, where you've got the leaky bucket. If they get all the way through to the end of that sequence and those touch points, and it can be 20 plus, don't be shy. But if they get all the way through to the end and they haven't unsubscribed, put them in a very gentle, slow drip sequence that just engages them maybe once every 10 days with a newsletter or some event promotion that is all about give. And so that's, I would not worry about stopping. Do not stop. Design it to be an end-to-end sequence. And like I say, you only stop when somebody unsubscribes or asks you politely or impolitely to stop.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when you're doing the follow-up, say you sent 1 email that's 50 words or less, and then you send the follow-up email, just ignoring the fact that you've probably sent a LinkedIn post in the meantime. Just pushing this to the top of your inbox, or just touching base to see whether you've had time to look at it, or a completely brand new message that adds value again. What's best practice for that?
So those bump emails, I mean, I hate writing them, but sadly they work. Any thoughts on this ? So that type of message, you don't put hi or bye on. Okay, it's very informal. I'm just asking you the question. I don't need to reintroduce myself. It's all below in the previous message. You've been ignoring me as the recipient, but you may have actually been busy and might not have gotten to it. So when I'm really frantic and somebody does bring something back to the top of my inbox again, I'm actually really grateful, because I'll respond to that one and then I get to delete the previous one, and I feel like I've had a bit of inbox cleansing. So it's not always received in a terrible way, but I would bump twice, and that is back to the top of your inbox, just to summarize what I wrote below, bullet points. And then the last one would be any thoughts. After that, I wouldn't chase. And Pearlie, you mentioned it just now. I'd start adding value. You asked for a video about our product or service earlier. Well, what we've also done is created this white paper. What we've also got is this event. Or I recently read this book which told me about whatever the value needs to be, based on the situation that they may find themselves in, i.e. a trigger event of a new job, or just lost a job, or have open vacancies on their team, or are struggling with XYZ problem. Whatever you're giving them, let it help them. And again, you can jump into ChatGPT and have a whole load of fun with, here's the top 10 things you should be doing to help fix a problem. You know, give yourself a head start, create some really light touch content that's, I'm helping here, I'm not chasing. Here I am, not chasing, I'm helping, and continue to help. And they'll either remember you for that or get back in touch. But again, don't stop.
Yeah, I'm guessing the answer to this question is similar to what you just said, but another question is coming on the chat, which is relevant. What are a few top tips for building trust during that initial engagement period?
It all depends on the channel. So I would, at my first port of call in every engagement is to get somebody into a verbal conversation where possible. So the main reason being is, you know, your subject matter inside and out like no one else. You will probably know their situation inside and out like they don't understand it. And for me, the idea is to not sell, it's to clarify and qualify. So I don't know you're facing this problem, therefore I'm not going to push my product or service on you. All I want to do is find out a little bit more about your situation, direct you to some good resources, and just control the conversation, but make it about them. So this is all around, you know, when you meet a new friend or you're going on a date, the most interesting people are the people that are curious about you rather than ones that talk about themselves, right? So really, by being selfish and gaining information and insight and knowledge, this is what you want to help qualify. If you can help, you're actually being perceived as being caring and intuitive and helpful person to that individual. So make sure that you're establishing trust by giving and asking, not asking and taking. Okay, so the old sales was very much a push methodology. I do this thing, I know you want it, here's the value, the value, the value, sell you into submission. Now it's I don't know that you need this thing. Do you mind if I just work out if it is something you might get benefit from? And I'm going to assume nothing, and I'm going to ask lots of permissions, plenty of pleases and thank yous. But ultimately, the one thing that will win out above everything else is be human, right? You are not a founder. You are not a salesperson. You are not defined by a job title. You're a human being that's trying to understand something a little bit better. And if you can put that first, that will build you trust above anything else, because sadly, a lot of people are trying to sell.
Yeah. If there's like a funnel, is there any, like, what would the ideal funnel look like, I guess, from initial outreach to people that then might engage, to people that then have a follow-up conversation, to closing? And I guess the reason for that question is, if you're still trying to figure out whether you've got product market fit, I guess getting no bite whatsoever means you're not quite communicating the right thing to the right people. So if you know what good looks like, you can work out whether you're maybe not quite there. So is there any tips on like funnel, like what a good funnel looks like?
Yeah, well, I think there's two things. I think having a funnel is just that needs to be measured first and foremost. So what are the steps? What am I saying at what stage? And what is my conversion rate on that? If you can measure that, and you know there are CRMs that could do that, even if you're doing it manually in a spreadsheet or Airtable or something similar. You know, there are ways of working out what is working and what is not. So there is no right or wrong in terms of a funnel. It's a get a version 1, test subject lines on emails, test value propositions, test messaging, test problem statements. It's your responsibility to work out what lands. And arguably, when you get that one snippet of information that sees an uptick in open rates or an uptick in response rates, double down on that. Put less effort on test A and more effort on test B, and then create a new iteration so you're continuously improving. When you've got them engaged, then it's all around pipeline management. So you would typically, if someone is engaged with you through outreach, that is typically a marketing qualified lead, be it inbound or outbound, until you've had a conversation to qualify them. So we have marketing qualified leads, sales qualified leads, and qualified is, I spoke to you, I've identified that you do have a problem and the potential to invest and buy and use. Then you move them through to, it might then at a later date be a discovery conversation in more detail, or a product or platform demo, moving through to mutual action plans where you're bringing in multiple stakeholders. So if you're selling to a user, and typically it's easier to have conversations with people that will use a platform, they're not the ones signing it off. So if you're having conversations with them, ask who else is going to need to see this? Who else is involved in the buying process? Who else signs this off? How do you get it signed off? How do you need to see the information? When you know what you think that journey is after you've built that engagement and cold outbound, then you can say, right, these are the questions I need to ask. This is what they need to have done in each stage of the process. So I know what I need to be doing next, what questions I need to ask, what information I need to share. And I'm happy to send over this information in a loose template and format, so you can adopt it, evolve it, and edit it to your heart's content.
Yeah, there's one question. I'm just wondering what you would suggest if you're selling to enterprise. So when people are fundraising, we also say the same thing with investors. So you're trying out your message and you're seeing how you're communicating your value proposition and what lands with investors. And there's a lot of advice that says you make like a green, amber, red. These are the investors I really want. These are the ones that kind of seem to fit. And these are the ones that I don't think are the right fit. And you start with the red and you just test your value proposition on them and see what kind of questions they ask and what the appetite is like, so that you're not like trying the wrong message on the people that you think are the perfect people to sell to.
Yeah.
With enterprise businesses, there's like less available pool for them to try out messages with. So would you recommend a similar thing, which is that you're testing it on like not your ideal customer?
You can, well, I wouldn't test it on not your ideal customer. I think the understanding what the roles are. So I wouldn't test it on the signatories, the budget holders, the economic buyers. I would test it on the users for which you have volume. So we're working with a client at the moment that sell into the FMCG market, and their users are national account managers that look after supermarkets. Now, in each organization of the size they're targeting, there are hundreds of them. Absolutely hundreds. So if I get it wrong with 20 people in one company, it's still not going to affect the impact that I can have in building a relationship elsewhere. So in terms of testing the message, I would test it on the users, or the higher volume of heads in your TAM SOM, to work out that upward pressure. So you can build out automated email campaigns using tools like Apollo or Lemlist or similar, just to get the data. But this is something where you need to be able to measure. So where you're trying to create upward pressure from users, test messages there. If you're trying to sell to those decision makers, really you're going to be learning in the meetings. I wouldn't really be trying to test it on red, amber, green, because everybody could be a client. I would test it on the users and then ask them to validate what their bosses want to see.
Yeah, that makes sense. So on the kind of building trust angle, and this will tie into a question about pricing later, I guess sometimes building trust might be perceived as what you're talking about, but then you're also saying that you don't want to just like push your product onto someone and you want to be reactive to what they need. So I guess what is the balance between people trusting that you know exactly what your product is and what you're delivering and for who, and being reactive to what people tell you that they want? So you don't just sound like you're just like totally changing your product to fit in with them because you've already done all the research and do you know what I mean by that question?
Yeah. So again, when you've got different personas in an organization, they're going to have different pain points, they're going to have different struggles. And the products and services that you offer, not all of it will fit that one struggle. So what we try to encourage, certainly when running demos or having conversations, is don't show them or tell them about the entire contents of the kitchen, right? We don't want to throw everything at them. We just want to say, this is the one tool that will fix what you're speaking about at the moment. It does a whole load more, but I'm not going to bombard you with loads of that information right now. Why don't we just explore how we solve this one problem first, and then see if there's an opportunity to use other areas of the tooling in other departments or other areas of your business later. I think the building trust as well is important to say when you can't help. And I think that is one of the things that when we're trying to sell is like, this is an opportunity. I don't want to let it go. I need traction. I need to get you over the line. But if you're selling something to somebody where you know it's not quite right and it's not going to work, don't sell it, because it's just going to come back and bite you on the backside. So build trust, add value, but don't overwhelm. Let's just focus on what it is they need rather than tell them about all the things that we do, because no one cares what you do as much as you do. They just want to care that they can fix that one thing that they're talking to you about, and they might open up to you a bit later.
Mm-hmm. So a couple more questions from me, and then we'll move to a few other questions in the chat, or if you would like to ask a question directly, you can just raise your hand and then we will get to your question in a minute. Is there one or two reasons why people don't convert, generally speaking?
There are loads. Well, reasons or excuses?
Yeah, both.
Yeah. So typically you want to be establishing who they are in that persona makeup, right? So if we're speaking with users and they give you the brush off of there's no budget, that's a brush off, because typically they won't hold the budget. They don't sign it off, and they probably don't want to go up the hierarchy and ask for permission to have money. So what we really need to be doing is understanding why they're truly saying no, and addressing that objection directly. So not the one that you'll get a lot of is budget. Yeah, we don't have the budget. So if price isn't an issue, are you seeing value in the proposition? Are you seeing value in using a product or service such as ours? Okay, so we can try and pass that. They might not use it because of disrupting existing processes. So if you are hard to implement, if you are going to be taking up a lot of time with onboarding, if there's a big customer success element that needs multiple stakeholders, there might be a perception that it's taking them away from doing their job. So how can you make their buying and onboarding journey really easy and crystal clear? Understanding, again, as I said, whether they are the decision maker or not. But some of the biggest things that we've seen as blockers is that buyer journey. Is we're selling something for maybe £10 a seat, but we're making you go through an enterprise buyer journey by having a 1-hour demo. It's like, let people take trials, let people get their hands on it, let people watch videos online, let them self-serve, right? So there's lots and lots of ways that you can help the buyer come to a conclusion on their own without having to handhold. But typically people say no because of the powers that be have told them there is no budget, or other stakeholders are involved. And certainly in economic conditions that we have now, FDs are getting involved in more buying decisions, certainly at enterprise CFOs, and buying cycles are stretching out, and it is harder. But when you're having a conversation, you can ask the questions to map that out and truly understand how you can influence the sale.
I guess there's two questions in one in relation to that. If someone says they don't have the budget, what's the best way to come back? Like, what's the best reply to that to keep the conversation moving, as long as you are flexible, I guess, as the business owner? And then the second part is, people find it really difficult with pricing anyway, especially selling B2B or enterprise level. So how do you even figure out the right pricing for them and for you? How do you start that conversation?
Sure. So the budget complaint is not it's too expensive complaint. Okay. So first of all, if someone says I haven't got budget, you should not be dropping your prices to try and win the deal. Ultimately, you should be looking at value-based pricing. You've probably done the research in the market. Similar types of businesses that are charging similar rates to you. And if you notice, when you buy from most places, you don't get to go to a software company or a service provider and be like, I really want it, but I can't quite afford it. Would you mind dropping your prices? Like they just don't do it. So when budget is an issue, it's usually a lie and a deferral, or it's a way of actually saying we physically don't have budget. So you need to clarify that and validate that. And if you don't have budget, When are budgets being reassigned? Does it happen again next year? How often are people reviewing this process? Is it you that signs this off? How many people need to be involved in this decision making? Would a trial help? Whatever it might be, but you've got to find out whether budget is a real issue or not. And if it is a real issue, be prepared to walk away from that deal rather than sacrifice your price. And then when it comes to pricing itself, again, doing the research of what else is out there with comparables. A lot of you might have original businesses that don't have comparables, but there will be, off-the-shelf self-service SaaS businesses. There will be AI tools. There will be content tools, consulting firms, whatever it might be. You can get an idea for an hourly rate, a license per seat, monthly retainers, annual contracts, however that needs to look. You can slice it whichever way you want. And something that we've explored with other companies is around, you test. You keep putting the prices up until you get a lot of resistance or a lot of people dropping off. And so really, if someone's biting your hand off and going, yeah, no problem. Yeah, we'll take it. There's two ways of looking at that. You're either underpriced or you're very good value. And arguably in the early days, I think investment firms will want to see, yes, revenue traction, but also customer adoption. So we're working with a number of businesses right now that aren't selling at all. They're like, we need 300 users to do a validation of the tool and the system so we can get people using it to see if they're going to continue using it, and then we'll convert them to paying customers and just slowly step up their price afterwards to rate card as and when you get to it. So, I mean, I'm not a pricing analyst or an expert. I can't tell you what you should be charging, but what I would say is there are a number of mechanisms to get the users in, to keep them in, and then charging them appropriately when the time comes.
Great. And last question from me. Any tips on shortening sales cycles?
Yes. So again, when you've got this pipeline stages and this funnel, what we'll do, and I'll share this with you in terms of what you need to be doing at each stage, is understand how a potential customer can self-serve so that you don't have to send large contracts, do everything through DocuSign. There are other tools and systems out there. You may have come across Trumpet or Flowla, where you can put a lot of information in so that people can access the information and take themselves through a staged buying process on their own. I would make sure that you understand as much about the buying process as possible. There's nothing worse than, Purdy, you and I have had a chat. Great, you said you love it. I'm going to send you a proposal. You go missing for 2 weeks because then you've gone on holiday. When you come back, I realize you're not the decision maker, and I've then got to be introduced to 2 other people and do another demo, further extending this timeline. So when you truly understand the account, map the account, who's involved, who's buying, who's using, what information do they want to see, control the timelines, and build a mutual action plan. So we've agreed that I'm going to show you a demo, and after that demo, you're going to go and speak to A, B, and C person. I'm going to send you information for you to share with that person, and then we're going to reconvene again on the 27th. Control the timeline. If you don't set dates and next steps, then things drift. So remember, at every given point, you want to give your buyer a lot of movement to do the bit that they said they would do, but hold them to account on when they said they were going to do it. So make sure that we are keeping them on the timelines that we need to manage. So typically, sales drift, pipeline drift happens because it's our fault, because it's our priority, not the buyer's.
That makes sense. And everyone in the corporate world seems to just go on holiday all the time.
Yep.
So that definitely happens. Okay, I'm going to move over to Q&A. So we'll start off with the 2 raised hands. Mikhail, do you want to go first?
Yes, I almost forgot. I'm sorry. I have a question. Mikhail from Alpha Sales. I really enjoyed the talk. I've been in sales myself for over 7 years now. So it was really interesting to hear your comments. Maybe a little bit selfish question, because I understand that, maybe my understanding of sales is a little bit more. I'm curious about your arsenal after all these years. You mentioned plus 20 years of being in sales. I've heard about qualification frameworks. I've heard, I think, a little bit of Sandler and other methodologies you might have, or you might be using. Can you tell us more, like which one are within your arsenal in terms of qualification, for example, and sales style?
Yeah, sure. So
Self-implementation was one of them, and why these specifically? Because that might help others as well to point towards specific direction.
absolutely. So the most common ones out there at the moment are Medic and BANT, or MedPick and BANT. We use a variation of BANT, which is budget, authority, need, and timeline. So, and again, I'll share some questions around that as well, so that you're armed with it. This framework was built by IBM in the 50s, so it's really out of date, really out of date. And actually, if you're having an initial conversation to qualify a prospect, you're not immediately going to open with, have you got the money to afford what I'm selling? So we mix it up. Yeah, we want to know probably more about what the buying process is rather than when you've got budget. So we don't do a hard and fast framework for qualifying opportunities. We make sure that we've got a framework to uncover the information we need. So don't be afraid to take what's out there in the public domain as a qualification framework and adapt it to your individual style as a human being. If you don't want to ask a question because it's awkward, don't ask the question. If you need the information, how else are you going to frame it so that it sounds a little bit more like you? But recognize what information you need to have a sales qualified lead and build a toolkit around that. So look up BANT, look up Medic. I'll share more resources on that for the group so that you can look at those and make your own conclusions of what you think would work. I struggle with any methodology around conversation is that it is far too structured and it takes the human out. So if you just have in front of you a list of things that you need to find out, you'll ask the appropriate questions in your style and your way to get the answers. If you're following a structure that wasn't created by you and isn't rehearsed, it's going to sound insincere and like you're following a structure and a sequence that wasn't created by you, and you'll lose trust. So I skirted around that one, Mikhail.
Thank you. I have much more questions, but I'll give the floor to other ones. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Ewan.
Hey, so you mentioned about how you keep basing it like trying and changing your what your value proposition is and what your messaging is. And so I had a question, which say you've onboarded, I want to say 100 customers with one type of messaging, and then we change it. We change it on the website. We change it on our emails. What do you then tell your pre-existing customers about like your whole message change and your whole like, okay, we're not, so I mean, for me, for example, we started off by saying we're freelancing, creating a full-time jobs, which is a bit of a mouthful. And then we said we're labor infrastructure, which is a much easier way of saying it. But then your previous customers say, wait, so what are you now? And so how do you get around that problem with your existing customers? You've got new customers with a different messaging tactic.
Sure. Well, first of all, if you're onboarding 100 customers with one type of messaging, don't change your messaging. It sounds like it's working. So the other thing I would look at if you are changing messaging is it's got to come from the center. So what is your purpose? What's your vision and mission statement, right? Really understand that who are we and who is the business at its core. Then you've got to understand who you're doing it for and what it means to them. And so what you refer to yourself as is not what I mean by adjusting your messaging. What I mean by adjusting your messaging is we're talking to you about a specific pain point that we understood our first 20 customers had, but actually as we're going out and speaking to 500 more, no one else has. So we're trying to understand how we're talking to you, not how we're presenting ourselves. So this is not a case of go change how you present yourself to the general public and on your website. This is more of a I'm testing what messaging is landing in my email sequences and my conversations. So, are you finding that you're spending too much time doing X activity? No. Okay, well, that was a main issue that we were facing last year, but we're not this year. And so we need to adapt to make sure that we're meeting somebody with a need. I hope that clarifies that a little bit, Ewan.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Just before I move on to the next question, I just remember something that you said earlier, which I'm really shocked by, that when you send a message on when you send a connection request on LinkedIn without a message, you're more likely to get the acceptance than if you do send a message. Yeah. Is that because people are used to getting spam or something? Yeah. Or do they now connect
Yeah, so with the rise of automation and bots, is absolutely anyone with an internet connection can go and message 500 people a day. So we're at a position where there is a lot of content, a lot of irrelevance, a lot of attempted personalization. What I mean by that is, hi Purdy, we're in the same group on LinkedIn. I hope it's okay to connect. It's like, well, wow, that was really unimaginative. Or saw you are the co-founder and CEO and of XYZ company. It's like, yeah, right. You're just using snippets. It's nonsense. Just send a blank request. It's like most of the time people aren't reading it, so they'll accept. They'll take a look at your profile, and arguably that's building awareness enough before you send the email. So, but again, test it. Send a message. Send a very personalized message, and it will get through. Send rubbish at scale, and it won't.
Yeah, that makes sense. I get so many messages saying, I can see that you're connected to Margaret Ann Coyle, so therefore we should connect. So I'm like, yeah, she's my co-founder, which you obviously haven't figured out. Marco, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, please interrupt me, Purdy, if you think this is not relevant for the whole group. But I'm finding this, like the whole, the sales very, very difficult. And given that, Ben, that you have a business that actually, actually does this stuff, like how does an engagement with you guys work, and like how long does it take, and like at what stage is it meaningful for companies to work with you actually?
Sure. At the risk of hijacking the session, Marco, why don't we and you have another call later? As much as I'd love to take advantage and publicise,
okay,
I'll share some information at the end where we can get in touch, and you and I can definitely have a call. Same goes for anyone else, but let's keep it on Purdy's and M's time for now.
Absolutely.
I think people want to hear your elevator pitch, considering you do sales and everyone's so if you want to give us a 60-second elevator pitch, everybody will be up for hearing that.
Wow, talk about lack of prep. So we are a go-to-market and sales consultancy that support founders go-to-market and remove themselves from the day-to-day of selling so they can focus on growing their own business strategically. We do that through strategic planning and setup. We do that through tools, technology, and process, and we do that through staffing, resource, and execution.
Nice. Less than 60 seconds, I think. I wasn't timing it. Yeah, we can connect you afterwards, Marco. There have been quite a few questions that have come in about trials. So I don't know whether we spend a few minutes covering any insights or thoughts that you have on giving trials, because I think for a lot of founders, a bit like what you were saying earlier, getting a pipeline of users actually using the product is more important to them than generating revenue in the early stages. And they're especially interested in getting logos to put on their pitch deck of people that are using the product. But trials come with their own set of challenges, because then you need to convert them to paid, or you need to have like key KPIs of what success looks like from the trial. So I guess at what point in the sales process do you think you would bring up a trial? Like, would you kind of start with that, or would you flip to it at some point during the conversation?
I think it's important to determine what the goal is first. So if it is user acquisition and it's not revenue, then you lead with that. If you know that your journey is coming to trial, expectation around the trial, how long you've got, what you need to do. What I always encourage is, if you're taking a free trial, you need to sit down with me once a week and give me feedback on the product. So there should always be a transaction. If it's ever I'm giving and getting nothing back, it's not good for you as founders, right? So if I'm going to give you a trial, if I'm going to give you free information, I want something in return, even if it's feedback or half an hour, once a week, once every 2 weeks, whatever it is. If it's not about user acquisition and it's somebody said no, but you really want them on your platform, then that's a commercial decision, not a strategic one. So you will have heard these things known as loss leaders. And actually, we're going to do stuff for people for free, just so that we can get their logo and we can talk about being in partnership, and we can use that as a PR exercise that then helps you land other clients thereafter. But really, I would urge you to give a lot of thought to why you're doing this. So typically, product feedback, loss leader, or actually building user acquisition. And you could also look at how you're converting people, if that is part of your sales process as well.
Yeah. Is there any best practice on how long a trial should be?
Not to my knowledge. I do want to say here that this is my opinion on what trials should be used for and how they should be used. But you look at SaaS businesses, there's lots of freemium models out there. There's lots of trial models, and all of those will be used with very clear metrics behind the scenes of, if we get 10 free ones, we know that 3 will convert to paid at our low tier, and then further down the line, they will get paid to a professional or enterprise level client. So they will know what the buying journey is. They will know what that cost of acquisition is. And remember, it will cost you money to service a free trial, be it server space or account management. It's going to cost you money. So work out how much a trial will cost you in time spent or anything else that is involved in building out a trial for your customer, as opposed to, you know, if we here did free consultations all the time, well, we'd be pretty light on the ground in having, you know, billable time and resource. So it's not viable for us to do too many of those. So, you know, we need to know how many we can do, how much it costs us, and what our conversion rate is off the back of that.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Henna.
Hey, so the first thing I was wondering was a little bit about tools. So you talked about obviously finding leads, qualifying them, emailing them, all these kind of things. Just, I guess, what that stack might need to look like, and any suggestions for those who are just starting out. Yeah, and then the other question relates to the point around qualifying, when you're trying to give value, right? So let's say you say, here, check out this report that I've done, etc. I think it might be useful to you. That report may not necessarily link to your core product. So at what point of this sort of warming them up, bringing them in, do you then kind of qualify them basically and see, well, is your solution as relevant to them whilst you're going down this funnel?
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Okay. Yep. The first question is an absolute minefield around tooling and infrastructure. So first of all, understanding the channels that you want to sell through or use for outreach. So I'm going to assume B2B is LinkedIn, email, phone. We're probably all using our mobiles at this stage, but ultimately there are tools out there which you can get built-in dialers. So one of the ones we used in the early days was called Outplay, OUTPLAY. And it's a little bit similar to Apollo.io, but it's a bit more advanced. And it will allow you to build a sequence of events. So on this day, a call, on this day, email, on this day, LinkedIn. And then, so when you get up in the morning and you open your computer, it's like, oh, I need to do this with these people today. And all your messages will be pre-written, and it personalizes their name and their company name. And you can run analytics on open rates, conversion rates of that sequence. And you can also buy a phone dialer as well within it. I think it's like a £1 a month for the number, and then you pre-charge it with credit. But it just means that your phone, email, and task management is all in one place. And then you can make sure you've got full statistics on it. It doesn't do any LinkedIn automation, which I think is no bad thing, because people mistreating LinkedIn automation can end up in LinkedIn jail. And if you're in B2B, that's a very bad thing. But other tools exist. Walaxy is quite a cost-effective one. That's WAALAXY. It's a French company. There is Apollo, which I mentioned, Lemlist, also French. There are no shortage of tools. The one thing I would urge you to do is to work out what you need and why, because it's very easy to start throwing 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds a month at a tool that's going to save you a lot of time. And you can turn around in a couple of months and say, right, I'm now spending 300 quid in software and I'm only using it every other day. It's not actually serving its purpose, because ultimately that's what a lot of SaaS companies do. They get you to buy, and then you forget you're using it, and then they're taking the money. So anything you want, there's a wealth of information out there, but they're some of the ones we've used in the past. We use Ample Market now, which gets us data and phone numbers, and so that's around £250 a seat, I think it is. But really, if you're at that early stage looking at early traction, for £80 or less, you can get quite a really good toolkit to support you in your activity. And then the other question was around how do you build trust and value after sending resources, I think, Hina, is that right?
It was how do you qualify them whilst you're warming them up and
Sure.
basically giving them value, because it's not necessarily, I guess, linked.
So the value add is all around getting you into a conversation. So I'm paying it forwards. I'm giving you this. I'm showing you that I'm not a spammer. I'm not self-centered. I'm not just about our business. I'm trying to do what I can to help you. I think Gary Vaynerchuk coined the phrase jab, 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 right hook. So it's like give, 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 ask. Okay, so when you've given so much, when you've added so much value, don't be afraid to ask. Say, look, I've sent you a lot of stuff. Hopefully it's helped. Would you mind, if we arranged a time to have a conversation now? Because clearly I'm trying my best. And just ask for the conversation at that point. And I think if they're not and they're just on the take, they're probably not the type of business you want to be working with anyway.
Cool. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We've got a minute left, and there are so many other questions that I could ask, and I'm sure everybody else could ask, but I'm just going to ask a quick one from the chat, which I think doesn't have a super long answer. And then can you also just tell us how we can get in touch with you if we have other questions?
Yeah.
So the question was about kind of word of mouth and referrals, because in the B2C world, referrals work really well and kind of helping people to become referees with like discounts or promos. Does that work as well in B2B sales?
Yes, absolutely. I think the problem with it is over-reliance. And I think you need a deliberate activity to remind yourself to do it. So all your existing clients that you're working really well with, ask them. We're doing a research program and we want to find out about so-and-so. Can you introduce me to 3 of your network that you think would benefit from this conversation? Your existing network that aren't clients, ask them every single week, is there anyone that you can refer? Put in an incentive program, give them a cut of commission of any contracts that sign up, whatever it might be. I think often referrals ends up being damaging to the business because you don't ask for them and then you spend most of your time doing this. And hope, my friends, is not a strategy. So don't do that. Make sure you're very deliberate with it.
Awesome. That makes so much sense. Okay, cool. So if people want to connect with you, have follow-up questions, want to talk about what you do in a bit more detail, what's the best way for them to do that?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. So it's Ben Bennett with 2 N's, 2 T's, and the company is Second Voice Pro. Or you can head to secondvoice.pro, find me there. And that's probably the best route. Or if you've got your phones in front of you right now, I'm just going to quickly share my screen. No, I can't share the screen.
I can turn it on. I can turn it on.
Right,
Yeah, you can share it now.
I'm just going to quickly share some QR codes in Canva. And then there you go. Hopefully you can see that. So if you're the one on the right will book a Calendly, the one on the left is my LinkedIn profile. So if you want to scan either of those, you can do that. I'll send them across as well. But I'm going to send you information on pipeline stages. I'm going to send you information on BANT questioning. And I'm going to give you some funnel examples as well. And if any of you want to set up a conversation with me one-to-one, you're very welcome to do so.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. That has been
Thank you for the
very, very, very useful. I'm just going to stop recording, and then Ben and Sarah, we will say goodbye to you. Everyone else, if you want to stay on, if you have any questions for me and MA, feel free to stick around. Otherwise, we will see you next week.